everyone, thanks again for tuning into Sin's Workshop here on YouTube. I hope you're all having a great, wonderful, fabulous day. Today we're going to be talking about Broken Wish by Julie C. Dow. I have to say I'm totally a fan of Julie C. Dow. Mainly because... One second. I got it. Sorry about that, I had to change the angle. Anyway, so we're going to be talking about Broken Wish by Julie C. Dow, and I have to say I'm definitely a fan of Julie C. Dow. I was a fan of hers even before this, but I think she really has a talent for storytelling. And I say that because I read her previous series is super good. Absolutely loved it. In fact, I think I have one of her books right there. Song of the Crimson Flower. Yeah, she's really good, I think, at doing fairy tale renditions. I think that's what she excels at, because that Forest of a Thousand Lanterns, I mean, they are retellings in a way of fairy tales, and I think it's really great how she imbues her culture into these stories and retells them in a very fresh, unique way. Now, for Broken Wish, I think why I loved it so much is because it is really reminiscent of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, and I love the Grimm fairy tales. You know, they really are dark and gritty. They're nothing like Disney fairy tales. I always make the joke like, oh, it's been Disney-fied if something is too perfect. And I love the progression of the story as well. It starts off with the main character's parents. This whole beginning of the novel is really like Into the Woods. You know, really just have that Into the Woods feel with the parents. You know, they meet the witch next door, they become friends with her, they use her, and then they toss her aside, you know, for social status. And so she doesn't necessarily curse them, but they did break the bargain, and she did warn them, you know, you can't break a promise. If you break a promise, it'll come back at you threefold. And I think that's what makes the story so compelling to read, because it really is reminiscent of a fairy tale. And I love a good fairy tale. I love how the story takes place in Germany. I love how the Brothers Grimm, they don't make an appearance, but they are referenced. You know, they are referenced in the story. Sorry, my allergies have made me like really congested today. They are mentioned. Their whole journey of traveling through the country to gather up stories to create what we now know of as the Grimm fairy tales makes an appearance. And I feel like that creates a level of realism to the story that it otherwise would have lacked, if you get my meaning. Because you really feel the story. You really are drawn to it. You really are connected to it. And I think that is enticing for the reader, that you can go into this story and find it relatable and find it realistic at times, and yet be mesmerized by the magic and the fairy tale in the story. And that's what I think is really good about Julie C. Dow's writing, that she imbues the story with fantasy, that she imbues the story with magic, and yet is able to balance it out with some realism that doesn't dampen the story or take away from the fairy tale. It just makes it more of a fairy tale, if you know what I mean. I don't know. I think the fact that I've read a lot of Grimm fairy tales and have read many fairy tales in my life. I mean, I took a whole course on fairy tales in college. So I've read a lot of fairy tales in my life. When I read one that's really good, that is not just reminiscent of classic fairy tales, but also unique and fresh in its own way. I'm blown away. I, gosh, it was so good. Broken Wish was so good, and I'm really excited to see where this story is going to go, because it is the first in a series. I'm more interested to see if all four of the stories are going to connect to one another. Probably in the whole grand scheme. They're probably all going to be like standalones, but they're all probably going to like, because they're all written by different authors. And I know I'm going off a little bit of a tangent, but I am interested to see where the series is going to go in the future. I think that Dao has opened up a door to a fantastic new world, to a fantastic fairy tale. I think it's really compelling how she evolved her story here. And okay, so this is what I really loved about the story. Hopefully you're still with me. She references a lot of classic fairy tales. Snow White's classic coffin, Hans Christian Andersen's Red Slippers, the Magic Mirror, Evil Witch. She references a lot of classic fairy tales. And what I loved about that is she's sort of giving like an origin to these fairy tales. She's giving them an origin point, and I think that's really clever. I thought that was ingenious on her part, that she takes these elements that we know from classic fairy tales, like the Magic Mirror, the Evil Witch, kids getting lost in the woods. She takes these things, and what she does is, in a way, give them their own origin story. Because you can't read it and be like, oh, you kind of are reading it, and you're like, oh, so maybe that is where it came from. I think that's really clever with her writing, because she does it with such heart. She does it with such passion. They fit perfectly. It's not like she's playing with puzzle pieces, trying to figure out, oh, how I'm just going to throw this in there, maybe it'll fit. No, it's perfect. It works so perfectly together. How everything is just woven in there. How these classic fairy tale elements are just slipped into the story effortlessly. I think on her part, that shows such excellent writing. Oh gosh, I can't even begin to, I mean, you can already see that I'm pretty excited about it, and then I loved it. I loved it a lot. In fact, I'm probably gonna buy this book. I'm most like, just so I can have it on my bookshelf, and that I can share it with my son when he gets older, and my future kids as well. This is a story I want to read to them. This is a story I want to share with them. I want to sit by their bedside, and I want to read this story to them, because it's such a perfect fairy tale. It's not as dark as Grimm fairy tales, but it's not all musical happy endings either, like Disney. It has it has this perfect balance of magic to it and realism to it to make it really compelling. Sure, everyone thinks fantasy fairy tales, you think happily ever after. Fairy tales are really dark. I mean, the real fairy tales are really dark. They're a little messed up, especially Sleeping Beauty. I mean, Sleeping Rapunzel. Ooh, those are just two. Snow White, one of the versions of Snow White. I mean, come on, if you look them up, they're a little dark, a little twisted, too. They are dark and twisted. So this novel isn't dark and twisted, but it does have this atmospheric darkness to it that I think creates an engaging atmosphere, or an engagement. Sorry. It does create an engaging atmosphere for the reader, because it's so dark forest at night. There's something alluring about it. It's like you want to read it. But it's not so dark that's going to give kids nightmares. It's a perfect balance, it really is that perfect balance of not so fairy tale-ish that it kind of creates unrealistic expectations, but not so dark that's going to give people nightmare and just leave them all dreary. No, it does have this perfect balance of hope, and it does deal with, you know, prejudice, uh, how being prejudiced is, you know, bad, to put it simply. And I really like that. It's a mature read, but it's still going to be engaging for a younger audience as well. So it definitely is a story that any teenager or adult can appreciate, while also giving it to a child and they will appreciate it as well, because there are layers to it. Like I said, you know, it is a fairy tale, and there are layers to fairy tales if you read them. Um, and well, there are layers to any story if you read them, but that's a discussion for another day. This story has a lot of layers to it, and I love that. I love how engaging it is. I love the fantasy. I love all these references to classic fairy tales. I love the progression of the story. You know, I really do think it is engaging overall, and I loved it. You know, I loved it, and I'm definitely gonna end up buying this book. I'm recording this now, so before the release date. So when this airs, it's probably gonna be out. So you can bet if I got the money's not too tight, then I'm definitely gonna purchase it. Put it on my bookshelf. Read to my kid when he gets older. I did read some because I do read whatever I'm reading to my son. Whatever I'm reading, like whatever arc I'm reading, I do tend to read out loud to my son so that he hears my voice. And I think it's working because so far he's loving books. He'll crawl up to my bookcase and he'll be like, so happy. Makes me happy. But anyway, you don't want to hear about that. This was Broken Wish by Julie C. Dow. Definitely highly recommend it. I'm going to go ahead and give it 5 stars just because it's so interesting. It is so reminiscent of a classic fairy tale, but it has its own heart to it. It has its own imagination and creativity that makes it stand out, and I love that so much. I love her storytelling. I love how it just moves and flows. I love the structure and development of it. I can't say this enough. It really is engaging. So once again, Broken Wish by Julie C. Dow. Going to go ahead and give it 5 stars. Definitely recommend it. You can purchase it on bookshop.org. I do have a link in the description below. You can purchase it from your local, not purchase it. You can check it out from your local library if money is too tight. I know with this pandemic, a lot of people are still on furlough. Who knows? I work in the movie theater business. I might be going back on furlough because, you know, nothing's coming out. So we'll see how that goes. So I definitely understand that money is tight. So I definitely recommend checking it from your local library because the library is a great resource for your community. And you don't even have to get physical copies. You can get audiobook copies. You can get ebook copies. Libraries are great like that. They can give you whatever copy you desire. And I hope you will continue to support me by liking this video and subscribing to my channel. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and as always, happy reading.